welcome to whoever may be joining us today. My name is Zach. I am an animal care specialist here at San Antonio Zoo, and I'm very fortunate and blessed to be able to work with our two zebras. Now, you may see behind me the zebras are not here right now. That is the fun thing with working with prey-type animals. So these guys are native to Eastern Africa. Our specific zebras are Grant's zebras. They are one of the subspecies of the plains zebras. Plains zebras can actually be found kind of fragmented all throughout sub-Saharan Africa. We have two male zebras here. One, his name is Shadow, and the other's name is Notch. The way we get those names is if you were to look at them, Shadow has little shadow stripes on his hindquarters, and Notch has a little notch missing out of his left ear. Like I said, these guys are the Grant's subspecies of the plains zebras. Now, the plains zebras, you can actually look at a map, and they basically run all the way from Ethiopia and Kenya, all the way down through Tanzania, into Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and down into South Africa as well. And a thing you will notice when you look at the different populations of the zebras as you head south through the continent of Africa, you will notice that shadow stripe that I talked about with Shadow actually grows as you move further south. And the reason for that is what kind of happens in Africa is opposite of what happens here. Because most of sub-Saharan Africa is actually located south of the equator, and so their seasons are actually flipped to ours. So what would be summer for us is kind of like winter for them. And so as the farther you go south in the southern equator, the cooler it actually gets. And so those stripes and those shadow stripes actually help a lot with thermoregulation. That's really just a really fancy way of saying that it helps them stay warm. So those black and those brown and gray shadow stripes really help absorb a lot of the heat from the sun to get as much heat as they can, again, as the population moves further to the south. They need more of that to stay warm because it's getting closer technically to Antarctica, or polewards, as I should say. So I believe you have met some of my coworkers previously. They talked about the giraffes, and they talked about our gazelles that we have here. And I believe they threw out a vocabulary word called Artiodactyl, meaning an animal or a hoofed animal with an even amount of toes. So I think one of them said, can you name any Perissodactyls, which are ungulates, are hoofed animals with an odd amount of toes. And she said there were 3 of them that we have here at the zoo, and she was absolutely correct. And we actually have 2 of them in this exhibit right behind me. One of them is the zebra. The zebra actually only has 1 digit. So if you were to look at their feet, you would just see 1 little hoof. So they have 1 hoof, and a lot of your other horse animals, such as your horses, your Wisłowski horses, and your donkeys, they all also have 1 hoof, so making them all Perissodactyls. Our other Perissodactyl that we have in this exhibit is our white rhinos. So rhinos have 3 digits. And then the third animal that we also have here at the zoo is the tapir, that is also a Perissodactyl. Again, tapirs also have 3 digits on each foot. So zebras, in my opinion, are some of the most fascinating animals that you will see in Africa. They're kind of your quintessential ones that you will see as well. You know, people think of Africa, people think of Serengeti. One of the first things that comes to mind is seeing a bunch of zebras all over the place, which is more or less true. So it's kind of a shock that for the longest time, when researchers and conservationists and tourists would go over to Eastern Africa, when they go to sub-Saharan Africa, they were always mesmerized and really amazed by all of the zebras moving together. But no one really knew a lot about the behavior and the social structure of zebras until about the 60s or 70s, keeping in mind that there's always been some sort of influence from Europe in Africa for quite some time. So it wasn't until German researchers and conservationists began to go over and they began to realize some really cool and unique things about zebra behavior. So one of the things is they live in little small groups that consists or that create that big herd that you see moving. That family unit is usually composed of one male and anywhere between 2 to 6 females. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but usually you're looking about 3 to 6 females as an average female per group. Boys also have their own bachelor herds, and so that can be anywhere from 2 to up to 11 male zebras, usually on the younger end or usually on the way older end. So they zebras kind of have this unique family pattern where they live together, and they almost kind of have a semi matriarch, I guess you can say. It's not a full matriarch like you would think for the elephants, but a lot of that social rank within a they're called a harem. So within that harem of zebras, it's actually all of the females that really have that hierarchy. So the females who have been in the harem longer, females who may be in the middle of gestation or maybe lactating, maybe feeding a child. Those females usually tend to be higher up in that hierarchy. They tend to kind of be able to have a lot more say in what goes on in that family group, and it just kind of works its way down. And the reason why I say it's not a true matriarchy is because the male zebra or the stallion, the family stallion, really actually has a final say in everything. So the zebras may be walking to go somewhere, and if at the end, and if the male's like, nope, I want to go somewhere else, he's going to walk up to the front of that line, and he's going to push that female where he wants her to go. And so in a way, he really has the last say in it. And when I say they walk in a line, I am not exaggerating. They actually do walk in a line. Plain zebras have a very similar social structure to the Wisłowski horse, which I had a really cool opportunity to be able to do some behavioral observations on Wisłowski horses. And even if you were to take the animal outside of the out of their natural habitat and into a zoo setting, that still follows. I remember very, very obviously watching these Wisłowski horses walk in a single file line. And it's really cool. So you have your line of zebras, and let's say they're all heading this way. So you have your head mare or your head female over here, followed by her kids. And then you have the next female, followed by her kids. It's a really cool thing to actually see these zebras walk in a line to wherever they are going. Now, zebras actually do walk from one place to another on a fairly regular basis. They have their nesting grounds or their bedding grounds where they go. They spend the night, that's where they sleep. And then they walk in a line, in their single file line according to their hierarchy, and then they walk over to where they're going to graze. And it's almost kind of like a cyclical pattern as well. Researchers noticed over in sub-Saharan Africa, they noticed that the zebras kind of got up and started going at the exact same time every single day. And then if it was raining or if it was bad weather, obviously it changed a little bit. But they kind of had it down to more or less a science that, okay, at this time we're going to go get our food and then come back. A question that people often ask me is, do zebras sleep standing up or lying down? And the answer is yes. Usually during the day, they will sleep for a couple of, maybe about 10, 15 minutes standing up. And then when they go back, that's where they will actually do a lot of lying down and sleeping that way. What else to talk about zebras? Stripes. Obviously, these guys are really cool with their stripes. And much like our fingerprints, zebra will not have the same stripe pattern as another zebra. And the way that we kind of figured that out was when researchers would go over, they tried different ways to identify individual zebras for observations and stuff like that. And they tried different things. They tried shaving some of the manes down. They tried marking them with like kind of like a spray paint kind of a thing. And the best way that they found out was to actually get pictures of zebras on both sides. And eventually they realized that there were different patterns. Along with that different pattern, that's actually how individuals within a family group will actually be able to recognize each other. So the infant will be able to recognize its mother by its pattern, and same, the mother will be able to recognize the child by its pattern as well. And so people often ask me, why? Why do they have stripes? And there's a lot of reasons why they do have stripes. So like I talked about, thermoregulation, or being able to regulate their body temperature is one of the big benefits to having the stripes. Another one is camouflage, which sounds a little counterintuitive. You think of the yellows and greens of an open grassland in Africa. How could black and white be camouflage? Well, it's not camouflage like that. When you have, hundreds and hundreds of zebras running all at once, it's going to really disorient that predator, be it a lion or a hyena or whatever, that at that point they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and just get kind of disoriented and not be able to finish with the attack. But again, that's not the number one reason why researchers believe that zebras have stripes. The number one reason why they believe that zebras do have stripes is actually because of flies. So there is a fly that is native to sub-Saharan Africa. It's called the Tsetse Fly. And this is a really big biting fly that carries the sleeping sickness. So if you ever go to Africa, you'll probably have to take a pill every other day or every now and then to prevent yourself from getting this disease, because these biting flies will carry it. And so researchers realized that this tsetse fly, this biting fly, does not like to land on surfaces that are not solid. So if the zebras didn't have those stripes, the tsetse fly would land on them, they'd get bit, they'd get the sickness, and then who knows what would happen there. So that is what researchers believe is the main reason why zebras have their stripes. Do we have any questions so far?
Yeah. Are there stripes on their skin, or is it their hair that's colored?
I do believe I think it's a little bit of both. So these guys don't actually have true stripes. Layman's terms, yes, they have stripes. But if we were to shave our boys down right now, you would not see the stripe pattern on them. If we were to shave, say, a tiger, you could see their stripes on their skin. So it's mainly just the pattern on their hair itself. But that being said, if you were ever able to touch a zebra, you can actually feel the difference in the fur as you're touching it, as you go across the stripe, so to say. Yes. Give me a second. So, another really cool thing about zebras is they're kind of a forerunner for grazing communities. Basically what that is to say is that zebras can walk into a habitat that has very dense, thick grass that other animals such as wildebeest and gazelles can't eat. And so they're going to go in and they can eat down a lot of that foliage until it's to a point to where other animals can then come in and partake in grazing as well. And the reason why they're able to do that is because actually of their digestive tract. I'm a little bit of a nutrition nerd. It was one of my favorite subjects in school, actually. So I've always been really fascinated with nutrition. But these guys are hind gut fermenters. Kind of say that, you know how like we have an appendix, it's kind of there, it doesn't really have much of a purpose. With zebras and other equids, that appendix is actually fully functional, and it's called a cecum. And in that cecum are little microbes, little bacteria that is able to take a lot of that food particles and break them down in a way that our stomach cannot. And so they're actually able to get a lot of nutrients from grasses that way. Not to be confused with a cow or a goat or a sheep, where they actually have the rumen, that four-chambered stomach. Zebras do not have that. The only reason why they are actually able to get any nutrients from grass is because of that cecum. If we had a cecum, or if we had a longer large intestine or small intestine, then we'd be able to maybe get some from it. But because they're able to eat a lot in a short amount of time, they can eat a lot of more fibrous foods. They can eat a lot more dense stuff that things like wildebeest and Thompson's gazelles cannot. So again, kind of how the zebra ended up, how the adaptations and what makes a zebra, how it really allows them to live in an area that other animals couldn't, or how they were able to survive and become what they are today. Any questions? No?
What's a baby zebra called?
So baby zebras are, they're called the same thing as horses. So foals, colts, fillies, things like that. Fillies for females, colts for males, and then just foals in general as to refer to a baby. Okay, so Paul asks, what is the zebra's favorite treat? So here at San Antonio Zoo, their favorite thing is actually called zebra chow. And I have some of it right here. It's nothing too fancy. It is produced by a manufacturer who produces a lot of food and diets for zoological facilities. And we feed it to a lot of other wild equids throughout the country. So Visawasky horses, things like that. We'll feed them zebra chow. That's one of their favorite things. A thing that we don't give them too often, but they do really like it, is actually alfalfa. We have to really limit how much we give them alfalfa because it's really high in calories. And especially with equids, really with any ruminant or large or hindgut fermenter, especially with equids, we need to really watch out how much we give them as far as caloric intake. Because sometimes a high spike in calories can lead to a lot of issues with hooves, laminitis, things like that. So we don't give it to them too often. Usually if anything, they just steal it from the giraffes. It's one of the things that they really do like. But really, hay is their most favorite thing. These boys will eat about a bale, more or less, of hay a day. So these guys are what we call grazers. They're going to be eating a lot of grass and grass off the ground. That's their most natural diet. You know, you think of horses, you think of things like that. Hay, grass, that's what they're going to love to eat.
Can you explain again why they're over where we can't see?
Oh, yes. Okay, so the reason why they are over there is because these guys, they're very skittish. So they may live in a zoo, they may be under human care, but these guys still have all their natural instincts, all of their natural behaviors. And a really common thing for a prey type animal is to, when something new or something scary is to happen, or not scary, but maybe just new in general, is to kind of like, oh, what is that, and run away. So right now, they're kind of keeping a pretty safe distance from us. They're like, what's going on? Who's this new person? So that's kind of what we're seeing right now. But again, you know, if you want to talk about how behavior has allowed animals to live, zebras actually have a really cool defense mechanism when it comes to anti-predatory behavior, or how they're able to kind of withstand a lion or a hyena or whatever may be hunting them. Zebras will actually stand in a half circle, roughly about 50 to 100 meters away from the from the predator, with a lot of the males and the older, stronger ones kind of towards the front, with the young and the weaker ones behind them. And they'll kind of do that. All eyes, all ears, all everything will be directed right towards that lion or that whatever is hunting them. So that way they can really give an alert if that lion chooses to attack. A really cool thing that I found out about zebras, you know, you get into the zoo world, or you find your animals that you like, and you do all your research, and you know them pretty well, and then you read another book, or you read a book again, and you learn something new, and you're like, wow, this animal's even cooler than I remember. I actually had that moment a few weeks ago. I was reading up on zebras, and I actually found that zebras will fight. I forgot which animal it was. I can't remember if it was the wild dogs or if it was like a cheetah or something. But they will actually fight against those animals and will actually win. I think I read an insert from a researcher who even saw a group, or a family group of zebras defend one of their foals from a lion, And even though the lion had the foal in its mouth and was fighting and everything, those zebras were able to get that foal away into safety. So these guys are, yeah, they're really skittish, but they also know how to fight, which is really cool. Kind of dangerous for us sometimes in zoos. Luckily, our two are actually really, really nice. So anti-predatory behavior, a huge thing for zebras. That if they want to live, if they want to survive, they need to have these things down in order to do that. Now, I'm going to go back to talking about their family structure and social structure. Those bonds within that family group is actually really, really strong. And the way they're able to maintain those really strong bonds is through grooming. You'll see a lot of them spending time with each other, just cleaning their fur, just basically doing grooming. And that's actually how their bonds are really, really strong. And you'll even see that in Bachelor Herds. So I often see our boys over here grooming each other, taking care of each other. It's a really cool thing to see, especially when you know that that's how they build their bond with each other. And sometimes their bonds are so, so strong that if a zebra were to pass away either by natural causes or by being hunted, you will actually see even the family stallion going back to the spot where the zebra is and basically kind of mourn that animal. Not trying to add human emotions to it, but they'll definitely go over there. I've heard accounts of the male trying to bring a deceased foal back into the group. So these bonds are really strong with these animals. They're not so ephemeral as people would like to think they are. Excuse me, I'm not sick, I promise. They're actually really strong. These guys are really, really social, really social animals. Again, a really cool thing about these guys that makes them really unique in the plains of Africa. Do you have any questions?
Do they have the names?
Yes, so we do have names. Again, we have Shadow and Notch. They were born towards the beginning of October in 2003. We don't have an exact date on their actual birthday. I like to say they were born on October 3rd because that's my birthday. And quite honestly, who wouldn't want to share a birthday with a zebra? So, if you're my friend on Facebook and you see me wishing them happy birthday, don't ask questions, you know.
What is the lifespan?
Whew. So, if you're talking in their native habitat, maybe into their teens, easily into their 20s in zoos. We have all round-the-clock care here. They always have access to food. They always have access to water, easy access to vet care, all that stuff that they would not necessarily get in their native habitat. And I guess speaking of that, when I was fortunate enough to actually be able to go to Tanzania and actually be able to see zebras in their native habitat. And a huge misconception that I had when I was going over there was that, I'm going to get off the plane and I'm going to see zebras and giraffes everywhere. Like, I'm going to see the whole Lion King thing, everything, everything. And the truth was, it wasn't like that. Now, grants and plain zebras, they're not necessarily endangered. I wouldn't say that they're like the black rhino or anything like that. But these guys are near threatened. Which meaning, if you look at it on a scale of 0 to 6, 0 meaning least concerned, we're not worried about them going extinct, to 6 being they are extinct, they're about a 1. So these guys, their range used to cover most of sub-Saharan Africa, and now it's pretty fragmented. We've actually seen a few local extinctions in Uganda, in Rwanda, in Burundi. We've seen some of the populations in those areas actually go extinct. Again, that's just in those specific areas. The species overall is doing very, very well. But one of the things that's really hurting these guys is the loss of habitat. So you have these towns, you have farmlands that are growing out, and it's going into where the zebras would usually be. So you see a lot of competition with livestock. So these guys are now having to fight with goats and cattle for grazing land when it used to be just theirs. And so kind of what we've seen is that these zebras are now, and all of the wildlife, not just zebras, lions, rhinos, elephants, all these animals are now basically kind of stuck in the national parks, in the protected areas, because they know that they're going to have food there. They know that that's where they're going to be most safe. So they're not going to really go outside of those national parks. So you see a lot of people when they go to Africa for the first time, and they're not seeing the zebras and elephants and giraffes all over the place. That's because they're all in the national park where they know that it's safe. Now, one of the big issues with that is that there's only so much resources within those national parks. So eventually, the zebras are going to run out of grazing areas. The elephants will run out of trees and grass to eat. All that stuff's going to happen. So they're going to need to go from one national park to another. Now, a really cool natural phenomenon that happens is the Great Migration. So that's when a bunch of zebras and wildebeest leave Serengeti National Park. They head north into Kenya and they go up into the Masai Mara park up there. So a really cool display of how we ran out of resources over here, our resources are low over here. So we're going to make this long journey to over here to get some more resources. And so sometimes it's not always that easy. Sometimes they will actually have to go through a field. They'll have to go through an area where they're not safe to go get some more resources. And once those animals leave those protected areas, they can be hunted, they can be captured, all that stuff can happen. And so the biggest thing that's happened with these guys is actually a loss of that habitat. And that's kind of why we see some of these smaller local extinctions of the Grants and Plains zebras. And again, like I said, these guys aren't experiencing a silent extinction like our giraffes are. Their numbers just historically have been better, and they could be better. But again, like I said, overall, we're not too concerned with their numbers in their native habitat. And so, like I talked about, these guys, they always have access to food, water, and veterinarian care. Like I said, these guys get an entire bale of hay every single day. And unfortunately, that stuff doesn't come free. I would love to come to work and be able to donate my time to the zoo. Unfortunately, I cannot do that. With the zoo being closed, we are, we've set up an emergency fund for the animals to make sure that these guys get all the care that they can possibly get. Their medicine is not free. Their food is not free. We have to pay the water. We have to pay the electricity. All that stuff that goes to help these animals. And so every single cent that y'all can give really, really helps us out. It helps the zebras out. It helps our rhinos out. It helps the giraffes out. It helps everything. It helps all of our animals here. I think the last I saw, we have nearly 7,000 individual animals at our zoo. And right now they're kind of depending on us. We're kind of that first line of defense to give them the water, give them the care that they absolutely need. And that's not possible without, monetary help. So if you guys, like I said, if you guys even have a couple of dollars to donate to the zoo, that'd be fantastic. Myself, my entire staff would appreciate it. But above all else, the animals would really appreciate it as well. Alrighty. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in with us. My sincerest apologies, the zebras were kind of like, not today, thank you. But again, that's what you get when you work with unpredictable animals. Like I said, these guys are still very much wild animals at heart. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us, and until next time, San Antonio.